Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first episode of the Tapped Out MTG podcast. My name is Mason, and on this brand new show, we are going to be talking about anything and everything Commander related. But since this is the first episode, we need to do probably baseline introductions. My name is Mason. I've been playing Commander for the past 8 years, and Commander is my favorite format. I play almost exclusively Commander, mixed in a little bit of Popper and theoretically some Modern, if I want to explore that later. But guests, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Yo, I'm Marco, longtime Commander player, first-time podcaster, hardcore Cynic Mage, and devilishly handsome. I love me some Commander, I love me some Legacy, I love me some Popper, and I'm here to give all of my opinions, which are objectively correct.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I have been playing Commander for about a year and a half, 2 years. I've been playing Magic for a little longer than that, though, because I didn't know what Commander meant, and I thought the idea of having one person that was in charge of everything was stupid, and I was right. Anyways, I'm a hardcore Rakdos mage with a sprinkle of, green influence in there, because you love a big old-fashioned, big chunky guy, you know what I'm saying? It's the Timmy and me, so thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Hey guys, I'm Evan. I am an avid wild brewer. If you have any ideas for absolutely jank combos, that is my playing. I am in the love of limited format. Draft and Cube is where I shine, but I will love to join some games of Commander and Legacy.
So, for the first episode of the Tapped Out MTG podcast, I thought we would start with something pretty fun, and we are going to be going over what are the best one-drop creatures in Commander. Now, when I put this list together of the top 16, I thought it was going to be pretty easy. I was looking at some lists of everyone's favorite one-drops. It was not. This was actually so much harder than I thought. And so I ended up with a list of 32 different one-drops that I thought could make this list. And so rather than put the list together myself, I reached out to my friends, Mark, Hannah, and Evan, and I said, here are the top 32, narrow it down to 16. Because as much as I would love to have a 32 bracket list, that will take 3 hours to do, and we don't have that much time. And even then, when I sent them the list of 32, they came back with 10 others that I hadn't even thought of. So, through pure majority rules, we narrowed it down to this 16. We had to combine Mana Dorks into one category, Soul Warden, Essence Warden, same category for you, but I know we're not covering everything. Trust me, if you guys want to see it, we can do a much larger list at some time, but basically, this is the top 16 based on what we thought would be the top one drop in Commander. And so from here, we are all going to debate and argue about each round, and then the winner of that will move on to see who is the best one drop in Commander. All right, you guys ready to get started?
Yeah, let's rock and roll, baby.
Yeah. Okay. So, first off, perhaps one of the most iconic creatures in Magic the Gathering is Birds of Paradise. It is a one-drop green creature, it is a bird. It is a flying 0/1 that simply says tap to add one color to your mana pool. And for the record, we are counting all Mana Dorks, except for a very select few that have different qualities under Birds of Paradise. So those are going to be all of your Llanowar elves, all of your couple others that I can't think of, but basically taps for mana that's not explicitly mentioned on this list. It's a Birds of Paradise. And then its first round opponent is Giver/Mother of Runes. We decided to combine these cards in the same category, but Mother of Runes is a one-drop white creature, human cleric, that says tap. Target creature gains protection from the color of your choice to the end of the turn. What do you guys think? Who's in the lead here? I don't want to be presumptuous, but
Because the first thing you gotta say here is that it is offensive that you did not give a shout out to my boy Skrell Defector Might, who is Mother and Giver of Runes, but cuter, better, with Toxic, and Artifact, and cuter, and better. That being said, Mana Dorks win by a mile. Giver and Mother of Runes are both very good cards in any white deck, especially ones that are looking to specifically protect their commander or force through damage. That being said, if you are building a green deck, you need to have a extremely good reason to not be running basically all of the Bird. Most of the decks that I run any combination of 2 to 3 of them. Some run even a few more, and Birds of Paradise is maybe just the quintessential green card. It's held up since it's printing in alpha. Giver and Mother are real. The dorks reign supreme.
You covered all the bases there. One thing I definitely do want to mention is that Mana Dorks, which is my vote for the win here, definitely can also be synergistic outside of their ability to make mana. Like if you're building an elf deck, very popular in Commander, so many Mana Dorks for elves. You're building a tribal deck where it's like birds, like Castrol, who doesn't exactly work with Birds of Paradise specifically, or really any of these small little types that may not have base value synergy compared to an actual good piece. It's just kind of a nice little, like, especially elves, that's the big one. Like a nice little, like, oh, on top of that, this is also really good. You need to put them in a green deck, and so many of them are so important. Like one that comes to mind is like the amount of 3-color commanders. Then you have cards like Avacyn's Pilgrim, which is like so cool and so good. Like again, you need to have that quintessential white, but you're playing it on a green creature, which is usually easier to get if you have another mana dork, you know? So my vote's here. It's pretty obvious, I think, between the two, but you know what? Giver and Mother Runes, you guys did your best. A very iconic card, so good job.
Evan, you Katie.
So unfortunately here, Giver and Mother of Runes, I think, are some of the best white cards in a 60-card format. When you are buying a 199 card deck, you can only have each one pretty scrub. That's 3 of these effects of 1-drop creature, which is much harder to find than the vast majority of mana dorks that you can be running. Additionally, mana is just better than protection. You win a game of Commander usually by amassing the most mana and drawing the most cards. So if you can have a 1-mana creature that you can play on turn 1 that either makes you mana or draws you cards, you're instantly ahead of the rest of the table. And then you have 3 opponents getting these little advantages, like I'm tapping 2 mana on turn 2, is something that's going to push you ahead through the rest of the game. So unfortunately, we're also going with mana dorks over here.
Yep, and I would have to agree. So we're going to go ahead, award Birds of Paradise the win for round 1, and we are going to move on to round 2, because I think this video is going to take a little bit of time. Moving on, we have Stitcher Supplier. It is a 1-mana black zombie creature. When it enters or dies, put the top 3 cards of your library into the graveyard. Versing, one of the newest cards to this list was Ocelot Pride, a 1-mana white cat creature, 1/1. Oh, I gotta take a deep breath before I start this. First strike, lifelink, ascend. Somebody to get the city's blessing, and then at the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Then if you have the city's blessing, for each token you control that has entered the battlefield this turn, create a token that's a copy of it. That is too many words for a 1-drop creature to think that much at the start of a Commander game. But what do you guys think? I mean, I didn't really speak on the last one, so I can go ahead and start. Stitcher Supplier, I think, is probably one of the best cards to see in your opening hand if you're going to be playing some sort of mill or graveyard synergy. It enters, it puts stuff into your graveyard that immediately starts, and then it's also a deterrent from people attacking you early, because the last thing people want at the table is for the graveyard deck to start filling their graveyard more. So I play this in a ton of my mill decks. I think Stitcher Supplier is a phenomenal card. But is it being power crept by 1-drops like Ocelot Pride? It is so crazy how much this card does. First strike, lifelink, and ascend to get you the city's blessing. Plus, it makes you 1/1 tokens. However, and I think I might be a little controversial in this, I might have to give the win to Stitcher Supplier. I think entering the battlefield turn 1 and keeping your opponents from targeting you with stuff is a little more valuable. I think it's insane how powerful Ocelot Pride is, but outside of cat decks, are you really playing it? Like, I know token decks will play it. I don't really play a lot of token decks, so Hannah, I know you can probably speak more to this card, because I know you play it in a deck or two.
Just a little bit.
but maybe it's my bias. I play Stitcher Supplier a lot more. I think it's a better card. But I'm gonna throw it over to Hannah, who plays Ocelot Pride.
So, at the end of the day, you can split Commander players into two categories: good stuff and synergy players. You want value, or you want your cards to all high-five each other when you play them. That's controversial, I know. But at the end of the day, all of these archetypes trickle down into either having insane value and an engine, or having cards that like to high-five each other when they enter the battlefield together. I just think that that's genuinely true. So, for example, Ocelot Pride is a 1-drop with a lot of words on it that I also happen to play in my Arabo deck because cats. It's a cat that makes, cats. It's very good. And that can be taken one of two ways. Like, am I playing it to create tokens and get an engine going and get synergy values and like get this stuff going? Or do I just want like a silly little, oh boy, I made cats. Now there's more on the battlefield, so then my commander's better. So the same argument can be applied to Stitcher Supplier a little bit, I think, because like Stitcher Supplier is less on the nose with its value of like copying every token you created on the battlefield in a turn, which is insane. But like every commander deck is 9 times out of 10 can get stuff back from its graveyard and enjoys having stuff in there. It's very helpful. It's a really big part of Commander. It's a lot of recursion from graveyards, or at the very least getting value from stuff being there. So I think Stitcher Supplier, especially because it has its synergies with cards that are probably on this list, like Gravecrawler and that stupid one from MH3 that makes treasure tokens and things. It wants these cards to exist, and it wants to be entering, it wants to be dying, it wants to do a lot of things that's like the marquee mono black or like Rakdos, Golgari like archetypes. So I think they both are really, really good, and they both work really well in either synergistic ways or in just pure value ways. I do think I have to give it to Bride just because it's such an abomination. Again, in Arabo, I recently just got this at MagicCon Chicago, and I got to play it while we were there. And a turn 1 Ocelot Pride is insane. I had like 20 1/1 cat tokens by like turn 4, I think, and that was like slow compared to what I could have been doing. So I have to give it to Pride, but it is a lot closer than the first two, and I feel bad because I play a lot of Stitcher Supplier and a lot of my Rakdos decks.
So I think I can hear this argument going either way. Unlike Birds versus Giver, this debate isn't two super Stapley cards. Both of these cards have requirements for you to build around them to really care about them. If you really want Stitcher Supplier to go in your deck, you need to care at least a good supply about your graveyard. Also at Pride, you need to care about both tokens and life gain to at least some degree. I think the debate ended up coming down to which card is more explosive and which card is a little more consistent. Ocelot Pride can accomplish a lot more when it's built around a lot, and especially when it's played on turn 1 and nobody's going to be able to block it. It is such an engine from turn 1. This is Commander, so getting the City's Blessing is pretty trivial, so even if you play it in the late game when you can't swing, even just gaining it into the life off of anything else is going to trigger it, which is amazing. That being said, Stitcher Supplier is going to accomplish almost the exact same amount no matter when you draw it and when you play it. It is the single best rate in the entire game for milling yourself outside of maybe Hermit Druid, and even then you need to untap with that card. Stitcher Supplier milling you 6 cards for 1 mana, in addition to giving you either a blocker or a sacrificable body, is so important in any decks that play it. While Ocelot Pride can be an entire win condition all by itself for 1 mana. I think the overall better card is Stitcher Supplier, because you need to build around it less, and it's going to accomplish more on average than Ocelot Pride will. But Ocelot Pride's best games are going to be better than Stitcher Supplier's best games.
So, Mark, what is your final vote?
It's Stitcher Supplier.
Okay. Evan, are we having a tie, or is Stitcher Supplier taking round 2?
So Ocelot Guide is another one of these white 1-drop creatures that is an absolute monster in 60-card formats. However, I think when it comes to translating to Commander, it loses a little bit of its flair, not as much as the Giver and Mother of Runes. A turn 1 Ocelot Pride, yes, is going to be amazing, but all you need is a 2 toughness creature to block it in the early game. In the late game, it's going to be great. You play it on turn 5, you probably have the City's Blessing already, but now you need the life gain. So are you a life gain or are you a token deck? I think to play Ocelot Pride to its max, you need to be both. Stitcher Supplier asks one thing: do you care about the graveyard? When I was learning how to play Magic, one of my friends told me that the graveyard is just your second set of cards in your hand. It doesn't matter if it's there, you have enough ways to get it back, and almost every single deck runs recursion. If you're playing Stitcher Supplier, you'll probably have some reanimate effects too. So I think while Ocelot Pride has a lot higher ceiling, I think that ceiling is significantly harder to get to compared to Stitcher Supplier always doing what can sometimes read as draw 6 if you have that ease of access to your graveyard, which in some cases and with some commanders exactly what you're trying to do. So I'm throwing this over to Stitcher Supplier.
Okay, I thought that was going to be a lot more controversial when I took Stitcher Supplier's side, but Stitcher Supplier wins with a 3-1 vote. Ocelot Pride, very strong card. I think it's really clear that Wizards is really pushing for 1-drops to become a lot stronger, but I don't know. Right now, all of those really old 1-drops are taken home. Round 3. We're doing another not a lot of text versus a lot of text. Deathrite Shaman is a Golgari 1-drop. It's a black or green mana. Elf Shaman 1/2. It can tap to do a lot of things. Tap, exile target land, and make 1 mana of any color. You can pay a black and tap it to exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. You can pay a green to tap it, exile target creature from a graveyard, gain 2 life. So it's graveyard hate and a mana dork together. I thought that gave it enough difference to warrant separating it from Birds of Paradise. And its opponent for round 1. We're combining Essence and Soul Warden, so we're just going to go with Soul Warden. Soul Warden is a 1-white, 1/1 human cleric. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, gain 1 life. Not just on your side. Anywhere where a creature enters, you gain a life. Evan, why don't you go ahead and start this one?
So initially when I looked at this, it's another wall of text versus real simplistic effect. I love Deathrite Shaman. This creature does so much, and every line on this card is relevant. The loss of life can be nice for closing out games and board stalls. The gain life can save you and just pad your life total that little bit when things get late. And mana dorks are great. I think round 1 showed us how great those are. On the other hand, Soul Warden provides such a simplistic effect at one of the best rates that you can get it for a life gain deck. Soul Warden has the issue that you want to be playing a life gain deck. You don't really play Soul Warden otherwise. I can see an argument for playing it in the mass token deck, but I personally wouldn't play it there. However, I think where Deathrite Shaman falls is getting lands into the graveyard. Fetch lands are not run in every single deck, especially at lower power commander tables. It can be difficult to get specifically lands in the graveyard. Now, with Stitcher Supplier, anything can get in the graveyard, so you might have that, but then that's your 1-drop instead of the Deathrite Shaman. I think I'm going to give this to Soul Warden just out of raw consistency. Soul Warden is always going to do its thing, and in the life game deck, it is one of the best cards in the life game deck.
Okay. I mean, I'm definitely of a similar mind to Evan, so I'll get mine out of the way. I think Deathrite Shaman get a lot better at higher power tables. When you're playing a higher power and everyone has their fetch lands, everyone has a land in the grave pretty consistently, I think that's when Deathrite Shaman really shines. That's when it's more considered a mana dork. But I mean, I run Deathrite Shaman in a good amount of my decks, actually. I love a card that can make mana and also serve as graveyard hate. But I also play with a lot of Soul and Essence Wardens. And dropping that turn 1, there's a good chance you're going to go up 10, 15 life before anyone really realistically deals with it. I mean, there are those times when it just gets sniped immediately, which is definitely the fair way to deal with it. But I have to agree with Evan. I think I have to give this one to Essence Warden.
I think one of the saddest things about this is, I think I agree with you both, so I'm just going to, out of the gate, my vote to Soul Warden, Essence Warden, just because that card is, both of them are just so consistent while also not feeling threatening. Like, you slam a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, and it's not near as threatening as, like, maybe a couple turns later once there are fetch lands in the graveyard and there is stuff to be exiling with it. But Soul Warden and Essence Warden never feels that threatening until you start gaining the amount of life, and then you're playing 2 creatures in a turn later in the game. Like, that is consistent at any point in the game, whereas the turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, I think, feels a little less good because, like, what's in the graveyard at that point? So, another thing, I do have to give Deathrite Shaman points for coolness. It's one of the only 1-drops on this list that is, like, truly and, like, actually, like, 2 colors, which is really cool. You don't see that a ton. And also, a graveyard is such an important line of text. If that said your graveyard, this card would be nowhere near as played and nowhere near as helpful. This saying a graveyard makes it so viable in Commander, especially too, because even if you're not doing inherently, like, again, like, you're putting lands in the graveyard, sure, but maybe you're not putting instances, sorceries, or creatures as much. This card gets better when your opponents are doing this thing. So I think this card is really, really well-rounded and can work at any table. But ultimately, Soul Warden, Essence Warden is just, like, the life gain, like, crown jewel. You can't beat it.
So Soul Warden takes the round. Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, you guys are right. 1-drops to gain you a bunch of life are really good. Good thing Deathrite Shaman does that too. And also makes you a bunch of mana. And also drains for no reason. This card has so many stupid words on it. This is a stupid little 1-mana planeswalker that never is bad and never does anything wrong ever. There is no point during the game in which playing a Deathrite Shaman is going to go poorly for you. From turn 1, as long as you are meeting the requirement of playing Evolving Wilds in your deck, it will be tapping for mana. If you play it on turn 10, it is going to both hate on graveyards or stabilize you or be a finisher. If you play it on turn 5, it's going to be ramping you while providing pressure. Soul and Essence Warden are probably the single best turn 1 any life gain deck can have, and it's also one of the best ways to get consistent life gain triggers. Once you get past turn 1, that card starts feeling significantly less good. If that card comes down on turn 6 when everybody already has their board states established, it will gain you like 2 life ever. If it comes down in the late game, it will provide nothing at all. It is an incredibly, incredibly good turn 1 and 2, but you need to be in exactly a deck that cares about a bunch of instances of life gain, or a deck is making a bunch of tokens, I guess. And keep in mind, those decks are also playing Deathrite Shaman. Those life gain decks are also going to be running this card because it's another way of gaining a life gain trigger every single turn. It is true that Deathrite Shaman falls off significantly at lower power tables where people are not going to be running the very broken and bannable card that is Evolving Wilds. But even then, if you're playing a graveyard deck yourself, you're still playing Deathrite Shaman to get your triggers off of it while hating on the graveyard. Deathrite Shaman is one of the most ubiquitous cards in the entire game. If only it were hard to cast, you can cast it for swamps or for it. There is no downside to this stupid card, and I would call it one of the best 1-drops in Commander flat. I hear the argument. I will live a die.
Majority rule. Is anyone switching their vote?
I'd like to jump in real quick and say the split flip on Deathrite Shaman is actually to its hindrance. With the concept of color identity in Commander makes Deathrite Shaman a lot harder to run. It being either mono green or mono black would add it to so many more decks. Being specifically tied to a Golgari deck plus other colors limits me on the decks it can be in.
Good point. We are going to go ahead and award the round to Soul and Essence Warden. All right. We are going to have to speed up a little bit. We have a lot of cards to get through. Next round. All right. Who is ready for another wall of text?
Yeah.
Risk the Redeemed. I think the only commander on this list. It is a Selesnya 1 cost. That is a green or white elf warrior 1/1. 2 mana Selesnya. Tap, put a 1/1 white creature elf warrior into play, and then you can pay 6 to tap. For each creature token you control, put a token into play that's a copy of that creature. Does a lot. One of the most popular commanders in Magic, and also the most popular 1-drop commander in Magic. Against Dara's Ascendant. A card that was definitely not made for Commander, but it exists anyway, so we are considering it. Dara's Ascendant is a 1-drop white 1/1 human monk lifelink. As long as you have 30 or more life, Dara's Ascendant has 5/5 and flying. So at the start of the game, you have your 40 life. Sarah's Ascendant is a 1-drop 6/6 life linker flyer. Dear God. What do you guys think?
So when I made my top 16, I put Risk the Redeemed at number 16 out of respect more than anything else. This thing deserves to be talked about because it is, well, until MH3, we'll get that later. It is maybe the best 1-drop commander of all time. I love its design. I love playing with it, and I love playing against it. It is cool, it is fun, it is interesting. Sarah Ascendant is a 1-mana 6/6 with flying and lifelink. I vote for Sarah Ascendant. I don't like it, but yep.
I mean, sometimes that's just how it is. Hannah?
It's the same thing as like it feels just like all of these other ones so far, like Wall of Text versus like really cool constructive card that does a lot of stuff. I really don't have much to add. It's Saris, and that card is so stupid. I'm sad I had to put it as high as I did on my list. Riss is cool, deserves the credit.
Yeah. Evan?
If there's one life gain card at the rate of 1 mana for a creature that is better than Soul Warden, it is Sarah Ascendant.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. You can't argue. At least I don't think you can. If you guys think
Then deserve this, man.
Risk the Redeemed beat Sarah's Ascendant, let us know in the comments below. I'm going to be reading all the comments as they come in and responding to each of them.
Please argue in favor of Risk. She deserves so much better.
Riss is very nice, but Sarah's Ascendant is broken, fundamental. Also, I didn't mean for it to be Wall of Text versus Simple Text. I rated these 1 to 16 based on your guys' response to what I put out. It just happened to be like this. But let's go ahead, move on to the next. I'm going to mark Riss off of my list.
Hi, I'm Mark.
All right. Delighted Halfling. It is another relatively new addition to this list. It is a 1-drop green Halfling Citizen 1/2. You can tap it to add a generic mana, or you can tap it to add one of any color, spend this mana only to cast legendary spells. That spell cannot be countered. People went insane when this card was announced, but now I don't think I see it around as much as I thought I would. Versus Spore Frog. It is a 1-mana green frog 1/1. Everyone knows it. Everyone loves it. It's Spore Frog. Sacrifice Spore Frog. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. So it's the battle of the 1-drop greens. What do you guys think?
So in the deck built to run Spore Frog is the best card in the deck. I've seen this card in a lot of Muldrotha decks. I've seen this card in a lot of Quorum style decks. I've seen this card in any deck that can consistently reanimate, consistently recur, cares about sacrifice triggers. In any deck that can recur Spore Frog as frequently as possible, Spore Frog becomes a hard lock that is not beatable. Do you know what other card is in that deck? Delighted Halfling. Because it's a green deck. If you have green in your color identity, do you know what you can cast with that card? Delighted Halfling. If your commander is green, you're going to run Delighted Halfling. It's fixing. It makes your commander uncounterable. Very relevant in a format where every damn counterspell ever printed is legal. It is a 1/2 for reasons beyond me, which means it does not die to the majority of small removal. Delighted Halfling is a card that is insane. It wins. Spore Frog's really good too, but you have to meet some requirement to play it outside of play green. Halfling.
Okay.
I'm going to be short and sweet here. As someone who used to play an Atali Primal Conqueror deck, let me just say that again. Atali Primal Conqueror. Before that card was CDH viable, I got it in LCI pre-release, and it was my favorite commander ever. Before it was a $40 card. Delighted Halfling is better. Like, it's just so secure. It's so nice. Delighted Halfling all the way. I love Spore Frog. Great card. It's Delighted Halfling. It's just not an argument. I'm sorry.
I would have to agree. Delighted Halfling. I don't play it as much. I don't think I play it in any decks. I should. I really should. I should really just go out and buy a couple copies of it. Like I think Mark kind of covered it. The decks where Spore Frog is terrifying are the decks that are built to turbo and recur Spore Frog. You're never in a normal deck. Like you take any commander deck that runs green, you just put Spore Frog in it. It's probably going to do nothing. It might save your life, maybe once, but catered to making your commander uncounterable, I think Delighted Halfling just takes it.
There's such a high ceiling on Spore Frog that is undeniable. This one drop is kind of a monster, and some decks do not have the capability of beating it. However, the zero opportunity cost to running Delighted Halfling is just undeniable. And surprise, every commander deck runs at least one legendary creature.
And I don't even like Delighted Halfling can also tap for generic. Is another thing I don't think we've really considered. It's real. Goes out Anador can cast non-legendaries.
A really good point.
Just more, but Delighted Halfling takes it with a nice sweeping 4-0. Moving on to one of the cards that I didn't initially consider for this list, but Mark begged me to include. We have Insidious Fungus.
Do you know what this is?
It is a 1-mana green fungus 1/2. For 2 mana, sacrifice the fungus and choose one to destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or draw a card, and then put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. I'm sure Mark has a million things to say about this, so when we do start it, I'll let Mark start. But it is facing off against an unfortunate round 1 matchup. Carrion Feeder / Viscera Seer is a 1-drop black. Viscera Seer says stack a creature, scry 1. Carrion Feeder says sack a creature, put a 1/1 counter and can't block. I just combined the 1-drop black 3 sack outlets into one category. Very useful. Very useful. There's no one denying that. But Mark, I'll go ahead and let you start this one.
So the first and most important thing that I'd like to note about Insidious Fungus is that its name sounds a little bit like the biggest of Chungus, which is what I say whenever I play it, and therefore makes it by default the greatest card ever printed. This is currently my single favorite card to play in turn 1 in Commander, disregarding a certain Esper of Sentinel that we're going to get to later. A turn 1 Insidious Fungus feels so good all the time. This card's modes are so great. In turn 1 in Commander, you are not yet in risk of getting rushed down, and people are using that time to set up and prepare, which is the time you're most likely to see the most dangerous artifacts and enchantments that are necessary to kill. It's a time when powerful mana rocks in the vein of Soul Ring are coming down, powerful draw engines in the vein of Baristic Study and a certain Esper of Sentinel, which is when early game interaction against artifacts and enchantments is super, super important, I found, and it feels good for that. It acts as a deterrent for enemy by playing those things, and if they don't, then your turn 2 can be dedicated to doing a growth spiral at 0 cost. If you have a turn 1 Insidious Fungus, then you guaranteed have a turn 2 play that will feel good no matter what it is. Destroying something feels great. Ramping yourself feels great. You can even just cash it in to draw a card. If you care about sack triggers, this card feels awesome. If you care about recursion, this card feels awesome. If you care about creatures in any capacity, this card feels awesome. It is a great blocker. It is great ramp. It is great interaction. It is big Chungus. I have been so in love with Insidious Fungus every single time that I have played it. I cannot argue against Viscera Seer and Carrion Feeder. 1 mana sacrifice outlets are so good. And I know there's no cost to it. You can just sack stuff for free and you get so much advantage, and they're good and they're great. I know. I'll let Hannah touch on that more. I'm going to vote for Insidious Fungus because it deserves to get a vote. Now tell me why I'm wrong.
He didn't plan on this. Mark, you were hyping up Insidious Fungus, and then I put the brackets together objectively just based on like the number 1 seeds were the ones that all 3 of you guys agreed on, and then the ones at the bottom were ones that had only had 1 vote individually. That's just where the lots fell, and Carrion Feeder / Viscera Seer, it's gotta win. I'm sorry.
A little bit of credit to Insidious Fungus. It reminds me of a card I really, really like from OLP1, which is Cankerbloom. I love that card. So now to the good cards on the bracket side. This Seer and Carrion Feeder I could talk about for hours. I want to harp on one specific thing. I play a deck where it's Rakdos Sack, but it's also a lot of it's like a combo. Like I need to be sacking a certain amount of creatures to make a certain amount of mana to get a certain amount of triggers, whatever. Hi, Choke.
No, Hannah, shut up. This is important.
And what am I talking about? There's a cat.
Okay, what do you think of Insidious Fungus? I bet you like.
My wife and I are getting a cat.
Insidious fungus tastes good.
That it probably does. And therefore it wins.
So my point is, Tier and Carrion Feeder can sacrifice themselves, which you don't usually want to do, but they can. And I have had games matter where they need to be able to.
Cruise.
That's what I'm saying, Mosheta. It's so good. Mahak Theater. Many times where that one last mana matters in the end step. It's so good. Insidious Fungus, you're doing your best. I love you so much. You're a better Canker Bloom. I'm giving it to Viscera Seer and Carrion Feeder.
Evan, are you tying up the score, or is Carrion Feeder taking home the gold?
My favorite part about Insidious Fungus is how nicely it curves 1 mana into 2 mana. We see this on cards like Graven Inspector. Honorable mention from me, did not quite make the list, but it gives you a 1 mana play and a 2 mana play. However, in Sacrifice decks, Viscera Seer and Carrion Feeder are some of the best cards in your deck, rivaled only by the 3 mana Sacrifice Altars. So unfortunately, the Sacrifice Outlets are going to get it from me.
Yeah. An unfortunate round 1 matchup. I would love to see Carrion Feeder. I would love to see Insidious Fungus try this again, maybe next year.
I will continue to argue in favor of this. I will live and die with one of the best Commander cards come out of 2024.
All right. Second to last round in round 1, we have Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, probably one of the most infamous 1-drops in Commander. It is a legendary Monkey Pirate 2/1. When Ragavan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure, then exile the top card of that player's library. Until the end of the next turn, you may cast that card, and it has dash for 2. I know there's a lot of obnoxious commanders in the game, and this is probably, now that I'm thinking about it, should be probably added to our banned commander list for tapped out MTG. Ragavan is just a powerhouse by its side. Dropping it turn 1 is ridiculous. Turn 2 dashing it in is ridiculous. But it is also going against the generically very good Haywire Mites. There's a generic 1 mana insect 1/1. When it dies, you gain 2, and then you can pay 1 mana to sack it, exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. Gonna be honest, Mark, I'd probably call this the better Insidious Fungus if I had to put a label on anything.
There is no growth spiral on the.
Nick was here. I know Nick would argue for Haywire Mite because it was Brothers War.
Oh, yeah.
That's fair.
But I'm due to go ahead, cast my lot for Ragavan. Nimble Pilferer is a disgusting commander. It's not that egregious in the 99, but it's still a very powerful card.
So I have 1 point to argue here, Mason. I'm about to agree with you, but I have one thing to say I don't agree with you with. I, after Sins of testing, think Ragavan is a pretty bad commander.
I know you had a Ragavan deck at one point.
I had a Ragavan deck, and it has like 3 good games, and then people realized, wait a minute, it's a 2/1. That's not very hard to do something about. Ragavan, if people see the monkey coming, it is not that hard to play around it. Having it turn 1 feels really good, but not from the command zone, because then people know to keep hands that have gut shot in it, which has happened to me on a number of occasions. If you have a guaranteed Ragavan turn 1, people know about, it is answerable. That being said, out of the 99 of any red deck, Ragavan is not only one of the best turn 1 plays, it's one of the best plays throughout the entire game. Ragavan from the 99 acts almost as a mana dork. It is not hard to get in with this thing on turn 1 if people don't know it's coming, and then it's ramping, and then it might be drawing you cards. It's a relevant play in the late game because of the dash cost, meaning that you can get in with it extremely easily. I like Haywire Mite. I've been happy with it in the slots I've been playing with it. Genuinely speaking, I play it less because I can play Insidious Fungus instead, which can be proactive, while Haywire Mite can only be reactive. Ragavan accomplishes so much out of your 99 it goes in almost any non-green red deck that I'm playing. And it even goes with some cool decks. Ragavan's a beast. I'm going Ragavan.
All right.
Yeah, so the only thing I really have to add here is there is one thing the Haywire Right does that's really relevant, Commander. I'm shocked neither of you two mentioned, which is get rid of the One Ring.
Oh shit, yeah.
That's true.
So that's a pretty big one. I don't play the One Ring. It's not particularly. It's banned in the tapped out Commander pool, which is interesting. But just in general, it's a little bit high power for the tables I like to play at. So, like, in terms of, like, this channel and the playgroups within it, it's not as big of a play. But there are genuinely competitive decks that I see needing to run this as answers to the One Ring, which is really important. And the decks that are playing One Ring, you need to have an answer to it. It's just a machine, which is, that's what the wisdom.
This might actually be pulling me over to hit the...
I will say another downside, it is green. If it was solely colorless and it could go into any deck, I think it'd be my vote. I'm giving it to Ragavan a lot closer than I should be. Haywire Might is really good. That green pip is such a problem. It's Ragavan.
Right. See if I can sway you over to the side of Haywire Might. Another thing that wasn't mentioned is Urza Saga is a card that can cure for Haywire Might. All of a sudden, your land is now enchantment and artifact hate. And I won't go any further on Urza Saga. It's amazing. But I think Haywire Might just is such a good flex slot at 1 mana. And like Mark said, blocking Ragavan is very easy in Commander because you have a creature in your opening hand every single game. So I'm going to send it over to Haywire Might for this one.
I'm so close to letting Haywire Might win me over. I think I'm definitely, after this stream, going to put it in some more decks. But like Hannah said, it's that green pip that really holds it back. I do still have to throw my vote to Ragavan. It's real. It hurts me more than I thought it would. I didn't see myself being so conflicted in this round. Like, when I was putting my list together, I'm like, oh yeah, Ragavan beats Haywire Might. Moving it to the last round.
Got him.
Tamio, Inquisitive Student. This was Hannah's submission for Must Include. Is a 1 mana blue Moonfolk Wizard 0/3 flyer, which is a huge body for a 1-drop. Whenever Tamio attacks, investigate, you draw your 3rd card in a turn, exile Tamio, return her to the battlefield. Under Tamio Seasoned Scholar, I'm going to have a cool flip effect, I'm sure, which is a legendary Planeswalker Tamio, starting at 2. I'm not gonna... Am I reading through this whole thing? +2. Things get -1, -0. -3, return an instant or sorcery. It's green, bad mana. -7. Draw card equals of half the number of the cards in your library, rounded up. Then you get an emblem that says you have no max hand size. Okay, another thing to make sure that is apparently clear, despite Tamio being a 1-pip blue, its color identity is green-blue. That is important to note, because of the Planeswalker on the back. What do you guys think?
I want to start.
By the way, so it's facing someone. Obviously, it has an opponent. And I don't know how I could... It is the one and only Esper Sentinel. It is a 1 mana, 1/1 artifact creature, human soldier. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless they pay X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. I think I'll just start with this. It is such an unfortunate matchup. I really think Tamio could have made a nice run in the most powerful 1-drops in Commander. It does... I'm going to say it does more than any other 1-drop on this list. Flipping into a really good Planeswalker. Starting out as a 1 mana 0/3 flyer is really nice turn 1. In the right deck, you can get to flip so easily, and then you get to draw all those cards. It's just... The two things is the color identity of being both blue and green, despite instead of just being blue. But its opponent is Esper Sentinel. And that's all you can really say.
Yeah. Its opponent's Esper Sentinel. As the person who sent this in, first of all, Tamio, just before I even get to the actual card, the art on both of this and its alternate art stunning, and I love the art on this card. It was half the reason I remembered it existed. I was like, oh my god, wait, that card's a 1-drop and it's really pretty. Let me send it in. I do think the decks where it's best flipped over on its actual Planeswalker side are Simic, I will say. It being blue-green, I could usually hear an argument for like a Flipwalker, like this whole cycle of them. Like, oh, what if the Sorin wasn't black-white? What if it was like black-red or something? Like, I've heard that before and I don't disagree entirely. I think this one's the best in its Simic color identity. I wouldn't change it. And I also really, really do think it's so cool how, especially in a format like Commander, especially the more high power tables, especially like where you can have fast mana turn 1, you can be playing this and flipping this with like a brainstorm effect, like trivially easily. It's really cool. It's just like the most unfortunate matchup ever. Like you just can't. It's Esper Sentinel. Like it's considered one of the best cards in Commander without even considering its 1-drop identity. I have to give it to Esper Sentinel in a really sad turn of events.
I remember talking about this with Hannah in preparation for this podcast, and I was like, yeah, I decided to put Risk the Redeemed on my list because I felt like the best 1-drop commander should get a shout out. And she was like, well, what about Tamio? And I was like, oh yeah. Yep. Tamio Included the Student is definitely my nomination for the single best 1-drop commander ever printed. The decks built around Tamio can and will flip it either turn 1 on a good draw or turn 2 on a bad draw. This card is trivially easy to turn over in this format, in most formats, but especially in this one. And having access to it guaranteed every game is just so powerful. It is the best 1-drop commander. It is not a good 99 card almost ever. It being blue-green really limits where you can play it, and outside of having specifically card draw in the command zone, like in an Uro-style deck, I don't see myself running Tamio all that often. Because you need something to go alongside it, and you can't guarantee drawing both of those things. Tamio is the best commander at 1 mana in this format. Only an OK99 card. Oh yeah, Esper Sentinel. Yep. I vote for that one.
Yeah. Evan, what you got?
I mentioned at the beginning that you win a game of Commander by amassing mana and drawing cards. But both of these draw cards. Wow, it's Esper Sentinel. It's being able to draw 4 cards a turn, sometimes even more if people are playing at instant speed, is insane. And I love me some Tamio. As a legacy player, seeing Tamio in Commander is so cool because I want the power of this card in a 1v1 format. However, I'll be honest, I don't think the backside's good. I think Tamio's going to die the moment you try and flip her. And I think the front side is preferred. And getting clues for just attacking is really strong. However, drawing cards for other players playing the game is also very strong.
Yeah. It's tough with Tamio, since if this is your commander, you're going to be dedicating a lot of your mana to drawing cards early to flip her. But if you are trying to flip her early, then that mana that you spent can't be used to get blockers on the field. So it seems like there's 2 directions that you want to go, and maybe want to flip it turn 4 or 5 where you can get a few things to defend her, but by then, I don't know. So, there you go. That is half the list so far. I think we're going to call this the end of podcast episode 1. If you guys want to come and join us next week, we're going to be doing the other half of the list. We're done round 1, which is the longest, and you know how brackets work. That means we're halfway through. So please join us next week as we decide who is the best 1-drop in Commander. You guys have anything else to add before we end this week's episode?
It should have been Insidious Fungus. Or Skrelf.
Shout out to the Shimaru.
If this episode does really well, we can do a full 32 card, call it 64 card. What's the best 1-drop? We'll spend 24 hours going through the entire.
It's not going to matter if you put my fungus up against the Viscerus here.
Well, yeah, we'll do it next time. But guys, thank you so much for watching episode 1. Kudos to you if you made it this far. I'm sure there's going to be some audio/visual errors that occur in this episode, but please consider subscribing and giving the video a like to show the algorithm that this isn't too bad. If you guys have any one drops that you want to see included in a future list, where you guys want to let me know what an idiot I am for not including Universal Automaton, who was my personal pick to put on the list.
Turns on Max Dorsberg.
Yeah, should be my. That's a whole other video. But guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.